Hey guys, excited to have you here for another contrast class. Today we're going to be talking about the exclusive tenant brokerage agreement. That is how a tenant hires you to help them find a property to rent, and the exclusive leasing listing agreement. The exclusive leasing listing agreement, which is how a homeowner hires you to help them find a tenant for their property. But before we get in and look at the documents, I want to have a little conversation with you around leasing and working with tenants. Working with tenants looks a lot different today than it did 10 or 12 years ago, especially from a financial standpoint. Used to be 10 or 12 years ago that when you helped a tenant rent a property, the typical commission that the agent helping the tenant received was 1 month's rent. Very different story today. Now, typically that commission is $150, $200, $300, on a good day, $500. Really difficult to find much financial success at those price points, especially when you consider that you still got to split that commission with the broker. So imagine meeting with a tenant, finding out what it is that they're looking for, getting them to sign the tenant brokerage agreement, going out and looking at 5, 8, 10 properties with them, finally finding one they like, getting hold of the landlord, finding out what the application process looks like, getting your tenant to apply, getting them approved, negotiating the lease, being there for the move-in, and then you get a check for $100. Does that sound like the best use of our time? Probably not. But there are going to be times where working with a tenant is important to you. It's going to be a family member. It's going to be a friend. It's going to be somebody that you know is potentially going to be a really good referral source for buyers and sellers for you. They're going to be someone that you anticipate is going to be able to buy on their own in 6 months or a year, and you want to do it to help further that relationship. And in those situations, I encourage you, yes, go out, help that person find that property, and get them in there. So I want to go ahead and go over to our first document, which is our exclusive tenant brokerage agreement. This is how the tenant hires you to represent them. And you're going to find this is very similar to the buyer brokerage agreement. And I'm just going to hit the highlights on this because hopefully you're not going to be using it very often, but want you to know what you're looking at when you get in here. So it starts out with putting the tenant and the broker's names in here for in consideration the mutual promises contained herein and other good, valuable considerations. John Doe as tenant and Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Partners as broker and its licensees do hereby enter into this agreement on the date of whatever today's date is. Okay, very simple so far. So what's the term of this agreement? Well, we are agreeing to work together from today until, is it 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 6 months from now? Pick whatever timeline seems appropriate. Usually 60 days or 90 days in working with a tenant is sufficient. Okay. The agreement goes on to define what the broker's responsibilities are to the tenant and what the tenant's responsibilities are to the broker. Okay. On the next page is where we define how we're going to get paid. And much like the buyer here in the state of Georgia, typically the landlord is the one paying the commission to the agent, but not all landlords do. And certainly as we talked about, you know that dollar amount is much smaller than it used to be. Okay, you can charge whatever you want to. Whatever you can negotiate is what you can charge that tenant. What this paragraph is saying is that the broker shall seek to be paid a commission from the listing broker under a co-op brokerage arrangement or from the owner if there's no broker. in the event the owner does not pay the broker a commission of at least blank dollars or blank percent, then the tenant agrees to pay the difference. Okay, so the dollar figure you want to put in here is what's the least amount you would be willing to work for, and that's a decision you've got to make. Be that $200, $300, $500, $750, $1,000, whatever you feel your time is worth. That's the number that you want to put in there. And I encourage you to, because most lease commissions on residential property are paid as a flat rate. I encourage you to use the dollar figure and put a flat rate in there. The figures I see most common are $300 and $500. Okay, just know, and your tenant needs to know, that if the landlord does not pay that amount, they're going to be responsible for paying that amount. But just like with a buyer, you can forgive that difference if you choose to. Okay. It goes on to say in this paragraph that if the tenant instead enters into a lease purchase agreement or a purchase agreement for that home, that you're going to receive a commission of at least, and I hope that you're putting in here 3% of the sales price. That's what I hope you're expecting to get paid, is a minimum of 3% on your sales. So we're going to put that in there. And then we're going to put in our protected period. So if our agreement ends and the tenant decides to go back to a property that we visited before within the protected period, we're still owed a commission on it. That way a tenant and a landlord don't conspire to cut you out of the transaction, where the tenant says, well, my agreement with my agent expires on Saturday. Why don't we get together on Monday and we just write up an agreement between us? No, we want to have a protected period. So even though our agreement ends on Saturday, the 90-day period following the termination, the tenant agrees to still get you paid. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Goes on to explain the limits on what the broker is able to do, puts our disclosures in here, and then our policy on agency. This is the next blank you're going to need to fill out. And unlike our other contracts where we've got little nice check boxes, you have actually got to type in here what are the types of agency we do not offer. Unless the broker indicates below that the broker is not offering a specific agency relationship, the types of agency offered by the broker are, well, we do not offer dual agency or sub-agency. So we need to put those two items in here. Okay, that was dual agency and sub-agency are what we do not offer. A few more paragraphs of legalese, and we get down to our independent contractor relationship. And hopefully you realize that you are an independent contractor of the broker. A little more legalese, and we finally get down to our exhibits. And I cannot think of any exhibits that you would need to have on a tenant brokerage agreement. And it looks like they haven't thought of any other than a retainer fee, and our broker does not allow retainer fees. So I can't think of any reason why you would ever need to check any of these boxes or what a special stipulation would be for this agreement. Okay, and that brings us to our signature page. And just like with our other brokerage documents, it's important that we have all of the tenant's information in here, because this is an agreement between the tenant and the broker. Okay, you're the affiliated licensee, you're the one that's signing on behalf of the broker, but the agreement's between the tenant and the broker. And we need to make sure, just in case something happens in your life and you disappear or unreachable, we need to know how to reach the tenant to make sure that we still fulfill our obligations that are in this agreement. So we're going to put our tenant in here, print their name, their address, their phone number, their email. If there's more than 2 tenants, we're going to mark an additional signature page, and we're going to attach that to the agreement. And then we're going to put all of our broker information in here and make sure we filled that all out because it's spread on 2 sides of the page here. Okay. And the receipt of a copy of this agreement is hereby acknowledged by the tenant. We're just going to fill this out and send a copy to the tenant after the tenant has a fully executed and signed copy. Okay. Next agreement is the one for the landlord. Okay. And for the landlord, this looks much like our listing agreement, but with some subtle changes to it. Again, so this agreement made and entered into in this date of today's date between the owner, John Doe, and Keller Williams Realty Atlanta Partners, hereby referred to as the broker. Okay. Whereas the owner desires to retain the broker as the owner's agent to exclusively rent and lease certain real property located at whatever the address is. 123 Main Street, Snellville, Georgia, 30078. Okay. So first paragraph, the term, the broker's hired to exclusively lease the property on behalf of the owner for a minimum term of blank days from the date of this agreement. Okay. So what is the length of time that we have, okay, to find them a tenant? Okay, so this would be 180 days, maybe. That would be 6 months. Could be 90 days. Okay. Owner authorizes broker to offer property for lease for a term of no more than blank months nor less than blank months. So we want a tenant, and the lease that they have to sign can't be any longer than this and can't be any shorter than this. Very often you'll see 24 months is the longest, 12 months is the shortest. For some, it's going to be 12 and 12. For others, that may be 24 months and 6 months. Okay. At a monthly rental of at least, and what's the rental price we're looking for? Is this $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever that is? Property shall be available for occupancy by a tenant obtained by the broker as of the following date. When can the move-in for the tenant be? Okay. The property is currently sitting vacant. It could be available for tenancy tomorrow if it's in rent-ready condition. There's a tenant in right now. They're not going to be moving out until July 31st. Do you think the property is going to be ready August 1st for a tenant to move in? Probably not. So we probably want to have August 15th in there, or maybe they need a full 30 days to do the rent ready. So we may have September 1st in there. Then how are we getting paid? Upon receipt of the first month's rent, okay, that is typically paid at the lease signing or at the move-in. Owner will pay broker a real estate commission equal to blank dollars or blank percent of the total rent paid during the initial term. This is usually going to be a flat fee, but could be a percentage. And notice that that percentage is of the total rent paid during the initial term. So if we're renting it for $2,000 a month and they sign a 2-year lease, we're basing that percentage off of $48,000. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, and just like with a buyer's brokerage agreement, you need to understand we're offering a commission to the broker that brings a tenant. Okay, so we don't want to put $300 in here and then advertise the property that there's going to be a you want to put $300 in here and advertise the property that the other agent's going to get a $300 commission. This is the total commission, okay, that's going to be received, and then we will share a portion of that commission with the other broker. And then we have to ask our question, well, what happens if that tenant decides to stay in the property? Do we expect to get paid when they renew that lease or not? And in our case with our company, I would think not, okay? because we do not allow property management of a property. And we'll talk more about that here in just a few minutes. But because we're not going to be involved in the transaction all year, we're not going to be building a relationship with that tenant. We're not going to be taking care of that tenant. We're not making sure that tenant stays in the property. Then there's no expectation that we have any influence on whether that tenant stays in the property or not. So I would expect that the renewals would be 0. You may have a different expectation for your business. You get to determine how you get paid and what you get paid. Okay, so that takes care of our first paragraph. Then we've got in here management by owner. Unless owner signs a separate management agreement, broker shall not be responsible for managing property, and broker shall have no further obligations under this agreement to landlord upon leasing of the property to the tenant. Okay, that is so key, and that is important with us. We do not, as a broker, allow property management. So you can take care of a landlord in marketing the property, in showing the property. You can help them write the lease for the property. Let me tell you what you can't do. We don't do tenant screening and don't want you doing tenant screening. That's part of management. So we're not going to qualify the tenants. We will help you find them, but the owner takes the responsibility of screening that tenant and deciding whether they're qualified or not. We won't do move-in inspections. I'm happy to give an owner a move-in checklist as a service to him. He needs to do that move-in inspection with the tenant himself, because he's documenting the condition of the property. So at move out, there's a decision made what happens with any security deposit that was made. We don't want to be involved in that conversation or that discussion. We cannot accept rent. We cannot accept security deposits. Those need to go straight from the tenant to the owner. And the reason is all of those funds have to go into a managed broker account. And we do not want the responsibility as the broker of having to keep track of all of those funds. That puts our broker license at jeopardy. So if you have a client that is looking for management, not just for you to market the property and find a tenant, then my recommendation is that you refer them over to a property management company. Let them do all of this work, and you take a referral commission from that company. And Atlanta Partners Property Management is the company I recommend for that. One of the reasons that I love them, they don't do sales. So you refer your client over to them, you are flagged and marked in that account as being who was the procuring cause for that particular landlord. And if that landlord ever makes the decision that they want to sell, they're going to refer them right back to you for you to take care of the sale. Hopefully that's clear for everybody. So now that you know what you can and can't do with a landlord, we'll continue with this agreement. So when we take that leasing listing agreement, where are we going to market it? Well, we're going to put it in Georgia MLS, FMLS, and KWLS. We've got our limits on broker's authority and responsibility. We've got more legalese. And we have that now familiar paragraph on what types of agency do we offer. And the two types of agency Keller Williams Atlanta Partners doesn't offer is dual agency and sub-agency. If you're not with Keller Williams Atlanta Partners, check with your broker. Find out what they do not offer. Continuing on down, we get down to sale of the property. In the event the tenant purchases or contracts the property, either during the lease term or within blank years after the lease term, landlord agrees to pay broker upon closing of the sale of the property a real estate commission equal to the following. You've got to decide what goes in there. If that tenant leases that property out for 3 years and then decides to buy it from the owner, do you deserve a commission on that? Can't answer that for you. But what I can tell you is if you do expect a commission for it, this is where you're going to put it in here. Okay? That within 1 year of the lease term, landlord or group-based broker, 3% or 1% or 2%, whatever it happens to be. In addition, if tenant pays owner a separate consideration to acquire an option to purchase the property, owner shall pay broker from that amount of real estate commission of blank for procuring said option. And we're going to talk about lease purchases here in a minute, so you guys can understand it, because you are going to get asked about that. And if you were to write a lease purchase for somebody and they did give option money on it, you would want to get a percentage of that commission. But my hope is that you will never write a lease purchase agreement. So, optional additional services. Okay. Do we offer credit checks? No, we don't. Do we do criminal background checks? No. Do we do reference checks? No. Do we do move-in agreements? No. Do we write letters declining them as a tenant? No. We don't offer any of this, and we certainly do not charge for any of that. So please make sure you understand what you can and cannot do as a tenant. Now, as far as brochures, the ABCs of agency is one that I always like to share so that a client understands what hiring me as their agent means. The others are going to be conditional. If the house was built before 1978, I would want the lead-based paint. If I'm concerned that mold be an issue or radon would be an issue, I may want to share those. But typically, I'm just going to share the ABCs of agency. You are not required to share any of these, okay? The fact that they are listed here and that landlord knows that they exist and they can request them is sufficient enough. You decide what you want your clients to have, okay? Exhibits and addenda. Are there any exhibits? Are we attaching a legal description, a lead-based paint exhibit? Again, we do not offer retainer fees. I would encourage you to get the lead-based paint exhibit prior to writing a lease agreement, but it does not need to be a part of this contract. So there's nothing here that is mandated that you have to have on your contract. Are there any special stipulations? Anything outside of this contract that needs to be considered would go here under special stipulations. And then we have our owner's acceptance. So again, this is a contract with the broker, so we need the owner's full information in here. Okay, 2 owners. If there's more than 2, additional page. And then our full information down here. And then we have receipt of a copy. This is hereby acknowledged by the owner. Complete that box after your client has signed it and return a copy to them, just acknowledging that everybody has a fully signed copy. So those are our 2 basic forms. Now, don't want to dig in deep because we haven't talked about the purchase and sale agreement yet. So I don't want to look at the lease purchase contract with you and go through that, and really don't ever want to go through it with you. But I want to give you the explanation so that you understand what a lease purchase is and why it is or is not a good idea, and what some potential solutions are for that. So most people don't really understand that a lease purchase agreement is 2 separate contracts. And I'm going to take this off the screen for just a second. It's 2 separate agreements. So you have your lease agreement, and then you have your purchase agreement. The purchase agreement is an option contract. The lease is all that's active right now. I am leasing your property, and I have another contract over here that says I have the option to buy your property at some point in the future at a predetermined price. Okay? So here are the different scenarios for you to consider. I want you to think about this from a landlord standpoint first. Okay? You want to lease purchase my property. Well, I have expenses with that property that have to be paid every single month. I have my insurance, I have my taxes, I have my mortgage on the property, and there's a market value for what that property costs to rent, okay? And that's typically what that lease agreement is going to be for, but it might be a little bit higher, okay, on a lease purchase, because I'm giving you a guarantee that you can buy this house at some point in the future if you have the money or can get the financing to do it, okay? Now, I'm also giving you an option to buy that house, okay? And we're going to agree today that you're going to buy that property for a certain price in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever we decide in that contract. But we decide today what that price is in the future, okay? And let's say we agreed today that we're going to buy that property for $250,000 in 2 years, okay? Well, you pay your rent every month, and 2 years from now, you want to buy that property. Well, that property is now worth $300,000. That's what market price is for that property. Guess what I have to sell it to you for? The $250,000 that we agreed to 2 years ago. Okay, is that a win for me? No, I've lost $50,000 of potential income from that. Okay, so let's say that prices have changed a little bit differently. And 2 years from now, instead of that house being worth $250,000, it's only worth $200,000. Okay, well, you've agreed to buy it from me potentially for $250,000. Well, are you going to pay $250,000 for my house that's only worth $200,000? No. So I've got a couple of options. Either you don't buy it and you walk away, or I agree to sell it to you for $200,000. Is that a win for me? No, it's not a win. And especially when you consider that over the last 2 years, when I saw prices going down, I could have sold it at any point, except I had an agreement with you that I would wait 2 years for you to do it. Okay, so the end result, that there's no real win for me. So what I have to do is I have to protect myself when I write that contract. And the way that I do that is there's a value of me giving up all of my options and me taking the risk about you buying it in 2 years. And that's called an option fee. Okay, so I have my lease agreement that says you're going to pay this much a month for the next 2 years. And then I have my purchase agreement, which is an option agreement. You're giving me $5,000 today, $10,000 today, $15,000 today for the right to buy that 2 years down the road. Okay. Well, as a landlord, if I don't charge an option fee, the only way that I win is we guess right today what the home price is going to be in 2 years. You get your credit fixed, find the financing, and still want to live there in 2 years and actually do buy it. That's my only win. Okay, that's a lot of ifs. So I've really got to have that option fee up front. Okay, if I don't, I'm just taking too much risk. Okay, now let's flip over to the other side and think about a lease purchase from a tenant standpoint. Well, I'm considering entering an agreement to buy your property 2 years from now. And I'm going to enter into a lease agreement that I'm going to pay market rent and maybe a little bit more because I want that option down the road. Okay. Not knowing what the price of the home is going to be in 2 years. Okay. And not knowing if I'm still going to want to live there in 2 years. Not knowing if I'm going to get my financing where it's supposed to go in 2 years. So I'm either paying a option fee today and giving that money to you, because I don't get option money back. That's not like a security deposit. Okay, that is an option fee. I'm paying you for the risk that you're taking on me buying your home in 2 years. So I'm either paying that extra money or I'm paying a higher rent. Okay, so in either case, I'm out some amount of money more than what I would have been if I just leased the property. And I'm hoping that everything works out hunky-dory. Either the price of the property goes up above what we agreed to today, okay, but we've already factored in inflation. I'm already paying above market price for the property because we're expecting the property to come in 2 years. So it's really got to skyrocket for that to be a win. And so I'm paying more over 2 years, hoping that the property value went up at least to what the agreed to sales price was. I'm hoping that things don't change in the neighborhood and I still want to live there. I'm hoping that nothing has changed in my personal life, that that property is still a great fit for me 2 years. And I'm hoping that I had the discipline to do what I need to do to get the credit that I need to get to buy that house in 2 years' time, and the wherewithal to save the down payment that I'm going to need in 2 years. Well, how often do you think that all happens? Less than 10% of the time. So for a tenant, that's usually a very bad option. The smarter thing, the better thing that you can do for your clients is to coach them that what they need to do is go find a property to rent that's below their budget. Start saving money aside, start paying off their debt, and get themselves into a position that when they are able to buy, you're able to go find them the best house for them at that time. Okay, they're placing a large bet, a large risky bet today on an uncertain future if they go with the lease purchase. However, all of that said, you are still going to have clients that want to do the lease purchase because they are desperate to own, they want to own, and they are confident that they know what they're looking for, and they're confident that they can get their credit where it needs to be. Well, the thing that I would caution you to do, go through one of the large lease purchase companies. Okay, couple of reasons for it. One is personal gain. So if I go and I negotiate a lease purchase with the owner of a property directly, they own that one little property. Well, I'm going to get paid on the lease today, and I'm going to get paid on the sale of the property when that sale is consummated in 2 years. Okay, and we already know that that big check has less than a 10% chance of happening. Okay, so all I can really bank on is that leasing commission today. However, there are companies out there like Home Partners of America, and there are other plans. That's just one I know specifically by name, that what they do is they have a tenant apply with them to see what's their credit worthiness, what's their probability, what's their likelihood to be able to buy in 2 years or 3 years, and what's their credit worthiness for being able to afford to rent the property for the next 2 years or 3 years. Once they're approved with Home Partners, you represent Home Partners as a buyer, and you go out and you find a property that meets their criteria that your tenant wants, and you buy that property for the tenant to move into. Home Partners is buying the property. They're then going to turn around and lease it to that tenant in a lease purchase agreement. You represent Home Partners in the transaction, and you get paid a commission on the sale of the property. So a much healthier standpoint for you. It's also a healthier process for your tenant. And the reason that is there's always the risk when a tenant enters into a lease purchase property that owner does not have the financial strength to take care of that property, to pay the mortgage on that property, and they can potentially find themselves at a major loss. Imagine that you put $10,000 down on a lease purchase, and you're planning on buying the property in 2 years, and you're doing everything you're supposed to. You're paying your rent, every single month. You've got your credit paid down. Your credit score is up. You're talking with your financial person. They tell you that you're on track, and you get a foreclosure notice in the mailbox because the landlord never paid the mortgage, and now that house gets foreclosed on. Do you get that $10,000 back? No. Okay. Whereas when you're working with a large company like Home Partners of America, their pockets are deep enough and there's enough protection there that tenant never has to worry about not having or never has to worry about their property being foreclosed on. And if there are repairs or things that need to take place during the rental period, they have the financial ability to make those repairs, because at that point you are still a tenant. So hopefully that's a good explanation. So I want to pop back over and show you, if you ever do a lease purchase, okay, your contracts are a little bit different. We're not going to go through them. I just want you aware that they are there. So you have a lease for lease purchase agreement exhibit. Okay, this exhibit to be used only with F201 for lease purchase agreements. Okay, so this is the lease portion of the contract. So you're going to have a lease, and then you're going to have your purchase contract. So this is the lease agreement. So it's not your normal lease. It's a lease just for a lease purchase. And then we have our lease purchase for sale exhibit. This is an exhibit to your purchase agreement. So you have your purchase and sale agreement with this as an exhibit that says this is a lease purchase contract. And then your other form was your lease with a lease purchase contract. Okay, so we'll be talking extensively about the purchase and sale agreement and the other exhibits. If you ever find a need that you have to use these, I'll only bring them up and show them to you so you know that there are different forms that you have to use. Come and sit down with me, talk with your broker, make sure that you're filling these out right for your clients. But hopefully these are going to be used so rarely, you guys don't need to know how to fill these out. You just need to know they exist. And guys, that is it for me today. I hope that this was really helpful. Hopefully you're ready to take care of those tenants, ready to take care of those landlords, and we will see you again very soon.